Oh,
Yes, that's what it was, Antonio?
yep.
Ah, okay. A whole new look at another different dimension of Torah from our last course, which was a lot more maybe spiritual, and a lot more, you know, psychology focused. This is going to be a little bit more in the nitty-gritty and focused on Jewish values. That's the plan. Now, it's called Beyond Right. What's this course all about? So that's what we'll start off with, the course introduction, and then we'll go into the meat of the subject itself for tonight's class. Feel free to turn on your cameras if you're comfortable, obviously, and chime in at any time with comments, thoughts, arguments, disagreements. This is the best when it's not a monologue, but a discussion. So, yeah. They tell the story of this Yankel. Now, in the old shtetl, everyone had a job in the town. Now, Yankel was the town's ganef. You know what a ganef is? Ganav. When in the Yiddish accent, the ganef, he was the town's thief. And it's the night following Yom Kippur. They just finished service in the synagogue, and the rabbi is sitting at home, completely worn out. It's been a long day. And there's a knock at the door. He goes to the door, and lo and behold, Yankel the ganef is at the door. And over his shoulder, he's slung a big sack. And Yankel says, Rabbi, your speeches this Yom Kippur, the prayers this Yom Kippur, they so inspired me, Rabbi, I've decided to return all the things I've stolen. And he starts opening up his sack, and this menorah is this one's, and this Kiddush cup is this one. And he starts unpacking all the things he's stolen. The rabbi says, wow, tremendous. Yankel's doing, he's taking remorse for his behavior. And he says, Rabbi, I want to give you a hug. I'm so grateful for what you did for me this Yom Kippur. And he gives the rabbi a big hug. And he steps out, and the rabbi sees him off. And a moment later, the rabbi looks and, hold on a second. Where's my watch? And he realizes, oh, Yankel must have made off with my watch. So he starts running down the street. He says, Yankel, did you steal my watch? He says, Rabbi, Yom Kippur is Yom Kippur. Religion is religion, but business is business. That was his response. Business is business. And I would say, in a certain sense, what we're going to bring out in this course is exact opposite of that idea. Because often there's a sense that, Rabbi, you do what you do. I don't tell you how you need to do your business. And Rabbi, don't tell me how to do my business. There's business, there's religion. And how you conduct your business and how you conduct your business affairs, they're left up to your liking and your choice, and just keep the religion out of it. But the truth is, if there's anything further from the truth, in Judaism, our Torah gives us an enormous amount of understanding, business ethics, enormous amount of that bring to the table in terms of how to live our life, our civil life, morally, ethically, in the deepest way possible. Okay? So where does it all begin? Looking at legal systems. Now, the truth is that every legal system is an outcome of the values of that land. There's underpinnings of every legal system are the values that create the legal system. So it's interesting. I'm saying in Western societies, those values are liberty, democracy. What else would you throw in there? Equality, yeah? But it's interesting, each country has possibly different, some values which they emphasize more than others. So let's say, whereas in the UK and Europe maybe in general, equality is a very high value. So there's a lot more, when it comes to legal things, there's a lot more social welfare programs and things like that. Whereas let's say in the States, where individual freedom is a lot more the emphasis, so you'd have much more emphasis on the individual freedom side of things. And even as things, let's say, as when it came to COVID, which was very interesting, you saw how different societies responded to COVID differently. I don't know if anyone was paying attention, but let's say in the States, where there's a lot more emphasis on personal freedoms, they were very nervous about this, how can you do mass lockdowns, and how does that impact on your freedoms, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in Europe, they weren't necessarily as concerned about imposing that kind of, because less the focus, maybe equality and keeping people safe is more the focus. So again, values underpin and form the basis for the society's laws. Now, a lot of times, interesting, this comes, it's a historic reason. Let's say just we spoke about, let's say, the States versus Europe. The States has a couple of things which often it's described that their laws are an outcome of history. For example, freedom of speech in America is hugely important. And part of the understanding is because the founding fathers came to the United States and they were suffering from not being able to say what they wanted to say. So freedom of speech became a prime thing. Whereas in Europe, freedom of speech and hate speech, for example, in the States is almost hate speech is much more allowed than in Europe. Europe, there's a lot more legal boundaries on hate speech because just go back 60 years and 70 years, right? And you had the Holocaust, you had World War II, which was propaganda, et cetera, et cetera. Hold on 1 second. I just want to see who joined here. Ah, Lubov. Good. I haven't read Russian just yet, so I was like, you have to watch out who joins your Zoom calls these days. Okay. So there you have it. See, talking about differences, difference in values, which become differences in the laws of each country. And what's interesting is therefore looking at Jewish law. Jewish law, in order for us to appreciate what Jewish law is all about, we have to appreciate Jewish values. And if there's any body of law which is more based on values, Jewish law is entirely based on values. So what, please God, we're going to come to understand over the next few weeks are what are Jewish values, and will give us a chance to really incorporate. We often say, I don't know how religious I am, but Jewish values is something that's important to me. What are Jewish values, and how can we really incorporate them in our lives in a more meaningful way, even if we're not living in a society which Jewish civil law is what's the going thing. We're living in a Western society, but Jewish civil law has fundamental Jewish values underpinning it. Let's go through it, and we'll get a better understanding. Okay, so I want to start off. I'm going to mix things up a little bit from the way it is in our book, and I wanted to start off with some case studies. A couple of case studies. Let's take a look. Turn to in your student books, page 8. Okay, so like we usually do, let's go around and take some turns reading. If you're up for that, if you're not, just tell me. Robert, you want to read for us case study A, page 8?
What, just the top bit or all of it?
Yeah, the whole paragraph. You got a long one.
No. Do you mean where it starts off when is doing the right thing an obligation?
Oh, not the grey box. No, just case study A from it. Yeah.
Okay, study.
Yeah.
Nicholas, is it pronounced Young, do you think? Or Young?
Yeah. Sounds like
Nicholas Young considered himself a lucky man. A German who immigrated to the United States in 1848, Young had worked hard to carve out a living for himself and eventually prosper as the owner of a mortuary in San Francisco. The business allowed him and wife Rosina to purchase a modest lot on the top of California Street Hill, where they built a quaint cottage-style home and planted a beautiful garden. Every day, California sunlight and fresh air would stream in through their windows. Young had no reason to believe that anything could interrupt his idyllic life, or that any one person could somehow deprive him of the beautiful days he had worked so hard to enjoy. But Young also hadn't accounted for Charles Crocker, a very rich and very petty man who would eventually become both his neighbor and the bane of his existence. Is there more?
There is.
Oh, yeah. At 6 feet tall and 300 pounds, Charles Crocker cut an imposing figure. He had filled his bank account by being one of the big four barons behind the building of the Central Pacific Railroad. By the 1870s, he could afford whatever he desired, and what he wanted was to loom over San Francisco like a gargoyle. Crocker and his wealthy partners began scouting California Street Hill for its scenic views and proximity to the city's financial district. Soon, a group of wealthy men, including Crocker, were buying up all the homes on their chosen blocks. By the time Crocker was finished, he had erected a 12,000 square foot mansion. With its new wealthy inhabitants, California Street was renamed Nob Hill. As the project neared completion in 1876, there was one nagging detail. On the northeast corner of the block, Nicholas Young was reluctant to sell. His cottage was dwarfed by the mansions going up, but he had come to enjoy the neighborhood. With one or both men causing acrimony, the end result was that Young was not moving. At a reported cost of $3,000, Crocker had his workers construct a wooden fence on his land that towered over three sides of Young's home. With its 40-foot tall panels, the enclosure acted like a window shade, blotting out the sun and cool air and immersing Young in darkness. Oh, that's it, right.
That's it.
Mm.
Okay, it went to the courts. And the question is, should Charles Crocker's fence be legally allowed to stand? And you can actually see it in the picture here. Look at these mansions, and you can't even see his house, but you could imagine that he basically is surrounded in three sides by the spot fence, and his little cottage is somewhere underneath that, in that enclosure, so to speak. A spike fence, what do you say? Gentlemen, ladies, should it be allowed to stand? Is this legal? We've got some attorneys, lawyers on the case here, so I'm expecting to hear from you. Not only you. Yeah, what do you, any votes? Robert, what do you say? Legal, not?
No, definitely not.
Based on, what's he doing wrong?
So he enclosed his house and took away the three side fence, took away his light, and took away all his view and his light. Is that right?
Yes.
Definitely not. Definitely should not be legal.
Okay. Just to point out that he's building on his own land, so this is not taking up any of Charles Young's land, but you say it's not Nicholas Young's. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Lubov, legal, not legal?
I am not sure.
Not sure.
I will wait. Yes.
Gabriel.
I'm rereading the case just because I want to give you a precise answer. Hang on.
Nathaniel, we've got 4 cases to get through, so keep it short and sweet. Go for it. What do you think?
I think that depends how long, what's his name, Young, lived in his property. Because every territory has different rules. I vaguely remember there is similar rule in Israel that says that if you live in certain property for over 30 years, it's illegal to hide the sunlight.
Interesting. Only if you've been there for a certain amount of years.
Yes.
Okay. So interesting. Good. First case study. Gabriel, you'll give us your vote on the next one. We'll hear 2 together. Case study B. Lubov, you want to read for us? Page 11. If you're up for it. Otherwise, we'll skip you and we'll come back to you later.
Yeah. Rachel maintains a large and beautiful flower bed in her yard, but one day her neighbor Joe built a high wooden fence between their properties that cast shade over the garden, causing the flowers to die. When Rachel asked Joe why his fence needed to be so high, she was told that it was necessary to protect his birds from cats entering the property. Rachel offered to replace the wooden fence with a glass screen at her personal expense in order to allow her flowers to receive sunlight without exposing Joe's birds to danger. But Joe refused to allow Rachel to replace the fence without offering any reason.
Okay, and the question is, should Joe be legally required to allow Rachel to replace his wooden fence with a glass screen? So in short, the case is, here, Joe's got this, he's got the birds, Rachel lives next door, and Joe decides he's constructing a big fence to prevent the cats from getting in and killing his birds. And that's what he does. But then Rachel doesn't like that. She says, I can make it a glass screen instead. He says, no, I don't want the glass screen. I made my fence. Can he be legally required to replace it to accommodate Rachel? Okay. Who thinks this he could be legally required? And I realize, Amy, we skipped you before. I apologize. Legally required to replace it. Say aye.
Hi, my son Sam. He might listen in for a bit. Okay.
So
Yeah,
what do you think?
Same answer for me.
Huh?
Same answer for me. It doesn't give enough information for how long Rachel has been there before.
Okay, so just to make a point,
I think. I think
differentiate between the cases. Lubov, 1 sec. Is here the difference obviously is this fence was built for a legitimate purpose, and he now is being asked, can you replace that fence to accommodate me? It's not going to cost you anything. Can I replace that fence? Does he have to accommodate her and allow it? Lubov, yeah, you were saying, sorry.
I thought that here it depends whether there is a right to sunlight, because in Russia, for example, there is no right to sunlight, and I know that in the UK it exists.
No sunlight in the UK.
It depends on that.
Okay, interesting. So, but you're saying that he will be forced to switch his fence based on the fact that she wants sunlight and to be accommodated. Okay, interesting. Good.
I agree, because to continue on your question, what if Rachel was the last one in? What if the fence was already erected and then Rachel came?
Correct. That's a good point. That's a good point. And the question would still be, can he legally be required to switch it if based on the fact that she's inconvenienced by it?
I think he should not, in any circumstances, be legally required to change the fence, which he already has. If he built a higher fence,
she's changing the fence.
No, but it is his fence. Even if she pays for that, he doesn't have. He will not be forced to accept a new fence because it's his fence.
Good. Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in here? Jeremy, good to see you. Amy, we skipped you before. I apologize, but we'd love to hear from you too.
Thanks, Rabbi. I mean, I'm not really sure, but I just kind of, if we're talking about values, I guess, I don't know, not speaking in a legal sense, I would think I would try to figure out, like, what's a sustainable model to live with the neighbor? What could we figure out that's a mutually beneficial outcome?
Good.
So I would, that's kind of what I'm thinking, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so you're saying that if you want to be good relationship with your neighbors, let's leave the legal side aside and let's see how we can maybe be more accommodating than what the legal requirements are.
Right.
Okay, good, nice point. Obviously, we're trying to understand from a legal perspective, can he be forced to accommodate her and give in to her change of fence request? Nice. Gabriel, want to weigh in?
This is actually a quite tough legal question, if you ask me, but both have a right of peaceful enjoyment of their property. It seems to me that Rachel's proposal was fair and equitable and was rejected without ground. If I was a judge in this case, I'll probably I'll probably force him to accept Rachel's offer or pay some kind of compensation to Rachel for her flowers. But I wouldn't just let him with that wooden door. Again, this is not based on more on equitable judgment, which is a mean of ruling a judgment.
Good, nice. And just to point out what Nathaniel's point is an interesting point to keep in mind. Would it make a difference if he lived there first versus if she lived there first? If she came in afterwards, would then she have no claim and he can just do whatever he wants because already
in this case, the flower were here before. This is said at the beginning. Flower were here before the fence. So
there we are. Good emphasis. Nice. Okay. So you're right. So when you build the fence, she's already there. True. Okay. Let's take a look at case study C. Where are we up to? Gabriel, you want to read for us?
Yes. Michael moved into a new house. Before setting up his new Wi-Fi connection, he realized that his neighbor have an open Wi-Fi network. Can Michael use his neighbor's Wi-Fi? His neighbor's Wi-Fi network without their knowledge? Yes or no? Legally, no. In practice, who cares?
Legally, no. In practice, who cares? Okay. That's an interesting one. Who cares? Well, can she have it? Can she say, you know, okay, we're not asking her really, but if he does ask, can she object or should she object?
She can object. Should she? That's depend how generous she is. I mean, her decision. Okay. Also depend Michael use on the Wi-Fi. Is he using all the bands?
Again?
I said it depends on Michael use of the bands. If he's playing video game and prevent the neighbors from using the Wi-Fi, then this is a problem. If not, if they're just sharing the network and no one noticed, then there is no issue.
So you're saying if he's harming her in any way, then that would for sure be a no-no. But if not, then he's just kind of riding on her network, then legally you're saying not allowed, but she
no. Legally, he has no right. I guess that I can tell you for sure he has no right. I'm saying is this sort of question don't need to be resolved with the law, really. It's just practical questions.
Okay. Let's take a look at case study D. Who's up? Nathaniel, go for it.
Sarah's next door neighbor, David, left on a lengthy vacation. It is difficult to find parking on their street, and David's driveway, situated smack in between their two homes, is now empty. Sarah wishes to park her car there while her neighbor is away. Should Sarah be allowed to park her car in David's vacant driveway without his advance permission? I think no. She needs his permission. That's clearly his property.
Clearly his property, and parking his car there is trespassing of sorts, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Anyone differ, or that seems pretty clear that shouldn't be allowed? No? Okay. So all of these cases are legal questions, but all of them bring us to a question of what are your rights, and should you perhaps, what are your rights, and what is the law's take on situations which somehow stray into the ethical and moral side of things? Does law play a role in that? Does law stay out of that, etc.? Now, really, this takes us back to an understanding of law altogether. And what is the purpose of law? We're going to look at what's the purpose of law in civil society. And then let's take a look at what's the purpose of law within Torah's perspective. Okay, so let's move back. We're actually going to go back now. And I want you to look at page 7. Sorry, not page 7, page 2. Exercise 1.1. Okay, so here you have you're a referee given a few minutes to address the players before a game. What would you say? You're a coach given a few minutes to address the players before a game. What would you say? Now, basically, at the bottom of that square here, you have a bunch of words. What words would be grouped together with which words to put in category 1, and which words would be grouped together with words the category which would be grouped together to put in category 2? You can even you have it printed out. I guess you can write that in. Otherwise, let's hear. What would you name each category? So let's say, yeah, does that make sense? Was that clear?
No, it's not clear.
Not clear. Okay, so maybe let's just leave the words out of it. Let me just ask you like that, and just the questions. Let's answer the questions. 3 minutes before a game, I'm a referee. I'm addressing the players. What do I tell the players 3 minutes before the game? And then I'm a coach and I'm addressing the players. What do I tell the players before the game? So what does the referee tell the player? Robert, I think your son wants to chime in here.
Go on, Sam. No cheating.
No cheating. Good. You got a good referee who knocks you into shape. What else? What else does a referee have to say?
Play fair.
Play fair. Okay. Yeah.
Try to enjoy, maybe.
Try to enjoy. Okay. Let's take a look at the coach now. I'm being prepped by the coach before the game. What's the coach going to tell his players?
Same things, but also try to win.
Same things, but try to win. Okay. What else? He's in for the win. What else? So what is he? Since he's in it for the win, what else is he going to tell them? Is he interested as you know?
Do whatever it takes.
Play your best. Do whatever it takes. Okay, nice. Maybe teamwork is dream work or something, you know, peppy, and pump up his players. Guys, play together. You're gonna, you know, keep to the strategy of the game. Remember what we laid out. You know when I remember, you ever watched American football where like the coach has got this whole ear set and it's like a whole chess game. I don't know. One of my friends once explained to me what's really going on behind the scenes. Like this whole strategy session going on. The coach is busy talking to the what's it called? The quarterback who's going to throw in. Anyways, that's the coach. Okay, pretty clear. The referee's interested in rules. A coach is interested in the win, but more than the win. He's interested in the strategy. He's interested in guiding the players on their best play, so they should really have the best game. Now, when it comes to law, what would you say? Is law a referee or is law a coach?
Referee.
Referee. And what's it refereeing? Well, how is it functioning as a referee?
Well, the emphasis is on fairness. The emphasis is on fairness rather than winning.
Okay.
There's the famous line in the Talmud.
Go ahead. What do you mean?
Well, the famous line in the Talmud somewhere, it says, "Don't be like a lawyer, be like a judge." You know, so you know, a lawyer is there like a coach to get one side to win, but obviously the law is about equality above all. I mean, fairness above everything.
Okay, so you're already quoting the Talmud, Robert. You're already onto the Jewish take of things. But okay, yes. So let's take a look. What is the purpose of law according to the texts that lay out the purpose of law? Page 4. This is a quote from the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Interesting. This is the period of the French Revolution, and this is a very important document which basically puts out the values that are promoted by the French Revolution, and this becomes adopted by the French National Assembly, 1789, and in essence, it becomes the base for a lot of the values we hold today in Western society. So let's take a look at what it has to tell us. What's the purpose of law? Amy, you want to read for us?
Sure. So we're on page 4, is it? Yeah. Okay. Secular law in the freedom to do everything which injures no one else. Hence, the exercise of natural rights of each man has no limits except those which assure to the other members of the society the enjoyment of the same rights. These limits can only be determined by law. Law can only prohibit such actions as are hurtful to society. Nothing may be prevented which is not forbidden by law, and no one may be forced to do anything not provided for by law.
Okay, thank you. So what do we have here, in essence? I think we heard your cat too, Amy. Did we hear that?
Yeah, my dog, sorry.
Chimed in, good. Okay, so here we've got liberty. Liberty means you want to be as free as you wish, but the problem is that your liberty can run counter to someone else's liberty. If I want to do whatever I want and they want to do whatever I want, that's going to kind of contradict each other sometimes. So therefore, this kind of law comes in, you call a social contract. We'll give up maybe some of our freedom to allow there to be law which will kind of determine what's your rights and what are their rights. And sometimes it puts like this. It says your liberty to swing your fists ends where my nose begins. So you can swing your fists as much as you want, but as long as it's not going to harm someone else, it's not going to. So that's within your rights. You can do as long as you're not breaking any law, and law is there to tell you what your rights are when you are out of your rights and you're already violating someone else's rights, etc., etc. Yeah. Anything to chime in here? Now, what's interesting is that Torah has a whole set of law too. Now, obviously, we're not talking about just Shabbos law and kosher law, which are ritual. I'm talking about civil law. Torah is given on Mount Sinai. We're about to come to the holiday of Shavuot. Okay? Torah is given on Mount Sinai. The first very thing that Moses starts teaching the Jewish people after the episode of Mount Sinai is he starts teaching them after Parshas Yitro, if anyone's familiar, comes Parashat Mishpatim. Mishpatim means, one in Hebrew, Mishpatim is law, civil law. Yeah? So straight off, the very first thing that Moses starts teaching the Jewish people after giving the Torah is he teaches them civil law. He goes through and what's interesting is the verse actually says, these are the laws which you should put before them. From this we learn that a person, if they have a choice, they should, when it comes to matters of civil law, they should go not to a non-Jewish court, but they should go to a Jewish court. And even if they know that the ruling will be the same in the non-Jewish court and the Jewish court, the Jewish person is instructed in the Torah to go to the Jewish court for that ruling. But civil law, why do you need the Torah to kind of mix in and meddle in civil law? Let society, we live in society, every society has its laws. Let a society govern its civil laws. Why does Torah kind of mix into this picture? You hearing me? My connection's okay? Yeah? Okay. Yep. So this question is is asked and answered by the Abarbanel. Text 2, page 5. Now, Abarbanel is a fascinating personality. He was born in Portugal, and he actually leaves the country together with Jews when they're shipped out of the country. Even though he didn't have to, he was the finance minister in Portugal, so a person of enormous stature, and he wrote a commentary on the Torah, and this is how he addresses this question. He says, Jeremy, are you up for reading? Do you have the sheet?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, take it away. So text 2.
Yeah, every human society requires laws. What is the advantage of God's Torah laws over the legal system set up by other nations? Why does the verse state that these are the laws you should set before them, thereby telling us that these laws are a unique divine system exclusively given to us by God? The reason for this is that the divine laws contain elements absent from other legal systems. God's laws are based on the principles of compassion and goodness.
Okay, so this is interesting. So Abarbanel tells us, thank you, that here you are, absolutely, there's legal systems of all kinds, but the Abarbanel tells us the driving, underlying purpose and force of what is driving Torah law is different from civil law. Civil law is focused on what are your rights. What are your rights? What's within your rights to do? What's not within your rights to do? And Abarbanel says what Torah's principle is based on, like you'll see in text 3, diligently observe God's commandments that He has commanded you. Do what is right and good in God's eyes. It's based on compassion. It's based on goodness. Doing what is right. So you could put it like this, maybe. Civil law is based on what's within your right to do. Is it within your rights to refuse now? You can refuse. Law doesn't require you to go beyond your rights. However, Jewish law mandates that you need to do the right thing. Do within your rights or do the right thing. Torah wants us to do the right thing. If we're going to go back to the analogy before of the referee and the coach, civil law, like you said, Robert, is to the great extent it's the referee. What you can do, what you can't do, the police officer, they're enforcing the rule book. This is allowed, this is not allowed. But is there a game plan here in terms of what laws function? Is law here to promote people to be the best of themselves that they can be, or is laws function to people to do necessarily the thing which be accommodating or things like no, what's in your rights you can refuse, etc., etc. Whereas Torah's thing is based on Torah wants us to do the right and good thing within the eyes of God. This is something which we find a bunch of times in the Torah. Torah tells us, be holy. Torah wants us to live, and really Torah law is based on this principle that it's not enough to do what's within your rights, that you're actually, and this is the big word, you're actually required legally within the Torah to do the right thing. That's an interesting, and then we're talking about this idea right here is going to play out very differently, therefore, when it comes to looking at these particular legal cases, which we've so far, the case studies. How is Torah going to tell us in terms of plugging my computer? What's Torah's response going to be in terms of what you have to do and what you're actually legally required to do? Torah gives us perspective in terms of what is expected of you to do, whereas a lot of the within civil society, there's it left up to the individual. How does he feel about it? But Torah says no, you're mandated, you're legally required, Torah says, to behave in a way where you're doing the right thing, and the court can enforce that to make sure you're doing the right thing. Now, what does that actually play out? We'll see that in a moment. But before we go on to that, there's one key text which I think really brings it out. Page 7, which demonstrates what ultimately the reason that Torah's laws are different to civil society's laws is because their purpose is different. Torah's, let's read it here. I'll read text 4. There are two types of laws: laws that create life and laws created by life. Human laws are created by life. God's Torah is a divine law that creates life. I think this is a text where you can spend quite a bit of time thinking about. But in essence, what it's saying is that human law is there to regulate society. You have law, society needs to be regulated, society needs to function. Law comes in, it regulates how society works. Torah is there to shape society. Torah wants us to behave in a certain way, and therefore its laws are based on and require different things from us, because Torah is not satisfied with us just doing, what, as long as you're not getting on each other's nerves, but Torah wants more. Torah wants us to do the right thing in shaping society in that direction. So, and just straight away, if we realize what this means, we realize how necessary it is to learn these dimensions of Torah. Even if we're, let's say, it might not be legally binding, the Torah approach to the way we're going to look at some of these cases, but straight away it tells us, hey, what is a Jewish value in terms of how to handle the situation? What would be the correct way from my Jewish perspective, from the way the Torah tells us, and the Torah gives us an anchor and says, this is the right way. This is how society should look. Follow this, and that's the kind of society we're looking to create. Okay? So, any questions before we start going through and trying to understand how Torah will go and look at each of these 4 cases? Any questions?
Just one quick thing. So here in text 4, right? So the word life actually means society, not actual life, right?
You're talking about in the text 4?
Yeah. Law that creates life, law created by life, it means society.
Right. I'm saying, yeah. And laws that created by life means, people live, and that's how most legal systems came along. You have people living together. You're living in a land. How do you get along? Okay, we need to set up a system of laws, etc., legal system. Whereas within Judaism, the Torah came before the people even existed. Kabbalistically, we know that God used the Torah as a blueprint for creating the world, which means that the entire system of what this world is supposed to look like and how we're supposed to come, Torah is there to shape what the entire, our interaction with everything within this world, and give us an approach and a depth to understanding what it's all about. Interesting, by the way, I think this is an interesting point, because I went to yeshiva for 6 years. What do you think most of our day is spent doing in yeshiva?
Studying Torah.
Which part of Torah?
Gemara.
The Gemara, the Talmud. What is the main thrust of what makes up Talmudic study? What is it? Is it mystical study? Is it philosophical? What is most of Talmud?
Philosophical.
Legal. Most of it is legal. Most of it is. Now you turn around and Nathaniel, you said philosophy.
Yeah, we don't act by these rulings that we see in the Talmud today.
But okay, but at the end, that might not be the case. But either way, we'll unpack that a little bit soon. But either way, most of Talmud is halakha. I'm saying it's not philosophy. Most of Talmud.
Okay.
So if you're studying Talmud most of the day, it means you're studying law most of the day. How many people do you know that are not planning on becoming lawyers in Western society? They go and study law a whole day. Well, you bored? You like law? Go study law, become a lawyer. What are you sitting and studying law if you're not becoming a lawyer? Right? Or you want to know how to make holes in the law, get around the law. That's the only reason you'd want to study the law, so you can play with the law. But otherwise, what's the point of studying law? So what are we studying law in yeshiva for years? And the answer is because within Judaism, the law is not there as a function that's just there to, okay, you know, let's use the law as a function, a way that we know how to legal play out a dispute. No, by studying the law, we're getting a Torah appreciation of the Torah values of how the Torah, you know, looks at a situation. How should you deal with a situation like this, like that? And therefore, you're, like we said, Torah is shaping society through its laws. And therefore, the more you study Talmud, you more start getting a Torah perspective of how to look at a dispute between people, how to appreciate valuing another person's property, another person's time, etc., etc. Those are things that you come out, you get from studying the legal side of Torah, because it's based on Torah values, based on Jewish values, and they come through in the legal side of things. Got that? Any questions? Okay, so let's go on then to start looking at, you know what? Before we start that, I want to show you a quick video, the lesson video. Hold on one second. I'm going to show my screen, and give me 1 second. Can you see what I'm showing you?
Yes.
Hold on 1 second. Let me do it. I'll do it a little bit neater. Just I'm not sure why. I'm on the wrong connection. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to switch my internet connection. Will get better. 1 second. Okay. Ah, here it is. Yeah, that's why my connection was a little low. Okay. Okay, apologies.
If God created the universe,
Almost there.
if God created the universe,
Sorry, everyone. Here we go. Share screen and share sound. Okay, you see what I see? Everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
if God created the universe in 6 days, it certainly did not take 40 days for God to hand Moses 2 stone tablets. So what was Moses doing up there all that time? He was internalizing a vast body of instruction to transmit to his people. So once the smoke and sounds of Sinai subsided, Moses began to teach, and the Jews were most surprised. They'd expected Moses to begin with a detailed series of highly spiritual rituals or meditations, matters that Moses had to go up to heaven to receive. Instead, Moses first launched into topics far closer to earth than to heaven. He rolled out a unique civil system with requirements unlike any other. Here are a handful of surprising examples. The finder of a lost item must proactively collect or secure the item, and then preserve it while actively seeking its rightful owner. Beyond banning defamation, the Torah even forbids gossip among friends. It requires an individual not only to rescue those being harmed, but to act preemptively. It makes it illegal to look the other way when a fellow traveler is hopelessly stuck along the roadside. It mandates respect for the elderly. It criminalizes the malicious delivery of bad advice. It illegalizes the verbal abuse of individuals whose disabilities prevent them from recognizing the abuse. But surely the Jews challenged Moses. God prefers spiritual worship instead of looking out for stranded traitors and fallen bracelets. Ah, replied Moses, I will soon instruct you in Judaism's rituals and festivals, but you must know that these civil laws are also spiritual. You see, God's goal is not for you to transcend the earth, but to change it and make it more heavenly. You will notice that the Torah's legislation is more than a guide to protecting rights and maintaining social order. No, these laws include mechanisms for molding a righteous civilization. From now on, each of you is legally obligated to do the right thing for those around you and to proactively extend yourself in the pursuit of good and righteous conduct. With that, Moses and the Jews launched into a spirited study of Jewish civil practice and its aspirations of a righteous society, a study that flourishes until today.
Okay. So there you have it. A lot of halachot, a lot of law within the Torah. For example, do you have a duty to rescue someone who is interesting? In the UK, there is no duty to rescue law. You can sit by theoretically and literally watch someone die, I think, as far as I know. And there legally, you will not be held responsible. Whereas in the Torah, that's absolutely not okay. You have a duty, you have to make sure that you are doing whatever you can to save a person. Returning a lost object, interesting. There is some legal requirement that if you pick something up and you discover that it's someone who's lost it, you might have a legal requirement to return it. But do you have an obligation to pick up that item in the first place to return it? In the Torah, yes, you do. And it goes on. I'm saying just even something like spreading gossip. That's what. You know, can you imagine legally you're not allowed to speak gossip? That doesn't exist at all within secular society. You'd see someone driving and the provided roadside assistance. I'm looking at figure 1.1, page 12. Yeah, so you have a couple of them. You see someone driving on the side of the road. He needs a what's it called? Let's call it a jump. So you could be a nice guy and pull over to do it. Do you have to do that? Secular societies. This is now in the realm of ethics and morals. Well, in Torah, you're obligated to. That's you have a Torah responsibility. You're legally obligated to do that because it's about doing the right thing. It's not about what are your rights. What are your rights? I'm on my way to the shop. I don't have to stop. It's his problem. No. If you're looking to create a society with doing the right thing based on doing what's good and right within God's eyes, there's no space for such a behavior of turning a blind eye. You need to stop and you need to help that person. Now, already straight away you're seeing we might not be held legally responsible because society is not based on Torah. Means say UK law is not Torah law. But for us as Jews who we want to live with Jewish values, this is important stuff to know. What is the Torah's perspective? What are these Jewish values? So the next place I want to go to is talking about Sodom. Who's heard about Sodom? Sodom and Gomorrah. You know the cities, the infamous cities that were destroyed? So these were bad like cities, right? They were corrupt. They were up to the worst of the worst. Terrible stories that the Midrashim tell us about what's going on, how they treated people, so on and so forth. Let's take a look at text 6. Page 15. Okay? Things have moved around here a little bit. Gabriel, now you're at the top left of my screen. Do you mind reading for us? Okay, yeah? Should we skip you? Got it? Okay, Jeremy, you want to read for us and we'll come back to you, Gabriel. Go for it.
Oh, sorry,
Got it?
I didn't hear. What's the paragraph you want me to read?
Text 6,
Text 6.
page 15.
I lost focus. I apologize. Let's see.
No worries.
Case B, case D, text 5.
Not
Text 6.
problem,
A
not
person is compelled by law not to act in a manner characteristic of an inhabitant of Sodom.
The inhabitants of Sodom.
Yes.
You're not allowed in the Torah to behave like the people of Sodom. What do the people of Sodom behave like? Gabriel, read for us 7-8.
7, 8. One who insists what is mine and what is yours is of average character. However, another opinion maintained that such an attitude is a characteristic of a wicked people of Sodom.
Okay, let's just look at that again. This is Haomer Sheli Sheli v'Shalach Shalach. One who says whatever is mine, and whatever is yours is of average character. Other people maintain that it's the characteristic of the people of Sodom. Wow, that's pretty extreme difference of opinion. One says that's average, one says that's like the people of Sodom. How can it be so radically different? So let's take a look at 7b. Gabriel, you want to continue for us? 16.
Yes, 7b. Both statements in the Mincha are valid because the second view, which classifies such a conduct as wicked, refer to those who refuse to permit others to benefit from them, even when they will incur no personal or monetary expenses as a result. Such a conduct is characteristic of inhabitant of Sodom. By contrast, the first view is in Mishnah. In the Mishnah, which classifies such a conduct as average, refer to those who refuse to allow others to benefit from them. Sorry, when doing so would come at a personal or monetary expense. An individual who adopts this approach cannot be compared to the inhabitant of Sodom because they seek simply to avoid incurring losses through the action of others, just as they would not inflict a loss upon their fellow. This indeed reflects the average character.
Okay. See, here we have an understanding what's going on here. We're told you are not allowed in Jewish law to behave like the inhabitants of Sodom. What are the inhabitants? What characterizes their behavior? It goes like this. If I have something and someone else can benefit from that thing, and it will not cause me any loss, I am compelled to allow them to partake in it. I am compelled to allow them to enjoy that. However, if I don't do that, and if I say, you know what, this is mine, I don't have to let you, that's Sodom-like behavior. Sodom-like behavior says, yours is yours, mine's mine, don't come near my stuff. No, the Torah says you're not allowed to behave like Sodom, which means that you aren't allowed, you are, or shall we say, you're obligated to allow, or as long if it's not coming at any, if you're not losing in any way, you have to allow someone else to enjoy. The expression is like this: this party is enjoying and this party is losing nothing out. In such a situation, I am compelled to allow the person to enjoy. Let's put this in practical terms. I am, let's say, going to the post office, and someone gives me a letter, says, can you put this in the mailbox together with your letter? I could say, yeah, take your letter to the post office. I can, but if I'm doing that, I'm behaving like Sodom. And in the Torah, you are not allowed to behave like Stone, and therefore you're actually legally obligated to take their letter along to the post office. It doesn't, that person's going to be enjoying, it doesn't take anything away from you, therefore you are obligated to follow the right thing and not behave like Stone. Got it? How does this play out in other legal things? Let's take a look at text 8, page 18. Jeremy, you want to read for us?
8.
A person.
A person has windows set in the lower portion of the wall of his house, and he's
sorry. Go ahead. From Maimonides, just pointing out where it's coming from. Sorry.
A person has windows set in the lower portion of the wall of his house, and his neighbor desires to erect a building that would block them. The neighbor proposes to solve the problem by installing new windows in the upper portion of the homeowner's wall. If this arrangement won't cause the homeowner any difficulty at all and would not require him to leave his home during the construction, he cannot prevent the new neighbor from performing this construction. The homeowner is compelled by law to allow the neighbor to close the window on the bottom part of his wall and create new windows higher up. This is because it should be Sodom-like conduct for the homeowner to refuse this accommodation. This principle applies to every situation in which one individual will benefit while his fellow will not lose anything as a result. In all such cases, the relevant party is compelled by law to cooperate.
Okay. The case is clear?
Yeah.
He wants to build windows higher up. So can the fellow who's moving, his windows are being moved, can he say, no, I don't want you to move my windows. My windows are where they are, and you got to deal with it, tough luck? Answer is, that's Stone-like behavior. And therefore, if he wants to say that, we could say, forget about what you think. We don't care about what you're compelled to allow this person, unless it's going to damage you in some way. If you say that it's going to somehow affect your life or something like that, that's something else. But if it's not having any bearing on you, you're actually compelled. You are obligated to allow it to go through. Now, let's look at that from is it within the homeowner's rights to say, don't move my windows? Is it within his right? Absolutely, it's within his right. The Torah says, we don't care what's within your rights. You need to do the right thing. Doing the right thing means you can't behave like Stone. It doesn't affect you and it's going to benefit someone else. You need to go along with that. And therefore, you're compelled to follow that. Now, with this in mind, let's look at how this might answer case study A and case study B. How would Jewish law tell us that we need to behave? First of all, spike fences. Does that sound like that would be okay within Jewish law? You're doing specifically something to hurt another person. It goes without saying that it's got no place within Jewish law. I'm saying you're doing the right thing, and here you're doing something in action only for one purpose. You're not even benefiting. That's definitely not even the realm of Stone-like behavior. Let's look at the case B, where Joe and Rebecca, what was her name? Rebecca? You remember? Rachel. Yes, thank you. Joe and Rachel, right? It's exactly like this case, Maimonides, with the birds and the cat. She wants to replace with a glass wall. All her expense, it doesn't affect him at all. It's within his rights in secular society, civil society. Absolutely. It's my wall. Don't get involved. I'm not going to start. You can't start touching my wall. I built it. It's on. However, within halacha, okay, is he being not nice? Absolutely. Is that the wrong ethical behavior? Absolutely. But within the legal framework, no, he's not required. Within halacha, within Jewish law, within Jewish civil law, absolutely, he is required to allow Rachel to switch it to a glass thing so that she shouldn't suffer as a result of his fence. And otherwise, it's stom-like behavior. And stom-like behavior is not allowed within Jewish law. Doing the right thing versus doing things within your rights. Your rights, absolutely, it's within your rights. Is it the right thing? No. If it's not the right thing, you're not allowed legally. It's not a question of morals and ethics. That's what the Torah principle is based on doing the right thing. Okay? So far clear? Any questions? No questions.
Yeah, just maybe one which is obvious for me, maybe not necessarily for everyone, but I would like to have your opinion in terms of hierarchy. When there is a clear clash between not only different laws within Judaism or between secular law and religious law, what exactly is the hierarchy of norms within Judaism and in comparison to secular law?
Good, very good question. And thank you for bringing it up, because it's something that I would like to have brought up. It's when you live in a secular society, the halacha is dina de malchusa dina. You need to follow the laws of the land. And therefore, if civil law would say that if you come to your neighbor and you say, hey, well, I want to switch this to a glass thing, and guess what? The Torah says you have to. He's going to say, well, I live in the UK, and the UK law says I don't have to. But the Torah says you have to. Well, guess what? You, in the UK law, and if you're going to try use this in a court of law, it's not going to work. And the truth is, that's, in fact, the Torah's perspective is when you live in the law of the country is the law of the Torah. And if the law of the country says differently to how the Torah's law is, you have to follow the law of the country. Okay? So yes. And therefore, again, I would say a lot of that discussion, therefore, is can I go to my neighbor and say, you're compelled? No. But let's say your neighbor comes to you with this thing. How should you respond? Well, now that you know the Torah principle, and you know the Torah value of how a person should behave in this situation, you should say absolutely, with pleasure. I know I can say no, but am I going to say no? The Torah would, if there's no place in the Torah for such kind of behavior. So Torah law is my values, and therefore I want to behave in that kind of way. That's why I say that even if we're practically not going to be able to enforce the Torah law yet, but knowing it is valuable in a big way for us to appreciate how we should be behaving in so many situations. So many situations. I'm in the shop. There's a guy with I don't know, jumps ahead of me in the line, or sometimes, or some how do you resolve those things? Well, Torah gives you perspectives on knowing what's the right thing to do. Okay, there's morals and ethics, but even like Torah would say, what's your obligation? Sometimes it's to let the person go first. Or, there's so many things which knowing those Torah values are really going to guide us. Now, I want to just look back at a very important text, which is the text from Nachmanides. Let's take a look at text 5, student page, the student book, page 13. I'm just jumping back. We're doing a little bit moving forward and back here, as you see. Just I felt it was better to the purpose of the class to rearrange things a bit. And this is the Nachmanides telling us the purpose of Torah's laws and how possibly it is the spirit of Torah's law, and really what's the thrust of what the Torah is trying to create here. Robert, you want to read for us text 5?
Our sages expounded on this verse and explained that it instructs us to go beyond the letter of the law. In other words, the Torah first exhorts us to observe all of God's commandments, and it now instructs us to be careful to do that which is right and good, even when not explicitly commanded to do so, because God cherishes good and proper conduct. This instruction is very important because it would be impossible for the Torah to exhaustively address all of our conduct with our friends and neighbors, all of our business affairs, and the welfare of society in the world. Instead, after offering multiple specific commandments such as you shall not go about as a gossip monger, do not take revenge or bear a grudge, do not stand by the shedding of your fellow's blood, do not curse even a deaf person, and stand in the presence of the aged, the Torah then concludes with a generalized command to do that which is right and good, meaning to go beyond the letter of the law.
Okay, thank you. So this is the spirit of the law, and this is an important thing. This is really what the Ramban's telling us here, is that the Torah can't spell out every single do and don't. Torah is laying out for us an approach. What is the approach that a person should have? What is the right spirit of the law? It gives us examples, and from those examples, we can appreciate what the spirit the Torah is looking after. And that spirit is to do the right thing, as we saw already. And therefore, you know, you have to make sure this is not about technically following the law and then undercutting the spirit. The spirit of the law is doing the right thing, and that's what needs to be upheld. And that's what leads us on to understanding the Sodom-like conduct has no place. It's got a completely opposite of what the Torah is looking to, the values the Torah wants us to do, and the Torah mandates us and requires us to do. Okay? Now, let's get back to our two cases, which we haven't yet addressed. We have a Wi-Fi question. Can I use my neighbor's Wi-Fi, which is unlocked? And we have final question that we looked at the state study of parking in my neighbor's driveway. Okay, now get ready. This is pretty radical what's coming next. Text 9, page 20. Nathaniel, can you read for us?
If one lives in his fellow yard without the latter's knowledge, does he have to pay him rent or not? The question is in regard to the yard that is not on the market for rent, but the squatter is a person who usually rents. What is the law? Can the squatter say to the owner, "What loss have I caused you?" Or perhaps the owner can insist, "Look, you have benefited from the property instead of paying rent elsewhere." This is a case in which one individual benefits while the other does not lose anything. The Talmud concludes, Rabba, the son of Rav Huna stated, "My father ruled in the name of Rav that squatter does not have to pay rent." Surprising, I have to say.
Okay.
Because in economics, there is what's called the alternative cost.
What does that mean?
It means that, how should I explain it? There is an alternative here, and it does bear a cost. I know that I didn't put my driveway in the market for rent, but had I done that, same way my neighbor is using it right now, there is an alternative for it. That's the alternative.
And he would.
I'm saying it's not completely accurate saying that I didn't lose anything. I lost the potential.
Okay, so good. What you're saying here is important, and that's what's important to clarify here, is that this property was not on the market for rent, because if it was on the market for rent, then you're absolutely right. By him being there, then it's no longer able to be rented out. So then that's causing a loss. But the fact that this is not on the market for rent, this guy usually would even be renting. He's now squatted in your property. Okay? Can the owner say, "Hey, look, you benefited, it's time to pay me"? And the rabbi says, "No." Why? This is a case of zenen v'zeloi chaser. This guy benefits from being in your property, but the owner has lost nothing from the fact that this fellow was there. Now,
One question: Did
Yeah.
the squatter ask for permission?
he's a squatter. Which squatters ask for permission?
Yeah, so that's the point. So if he didn't ask for permission, it's like with the Wi-Fi case, no?
It's like the Wi-Fi case. Okay, good. So
It's a good point. If he asked for permission, maybe I might be obligated to say yes, but if he didn't, he's
Right.
trespassing.
So wait a second. Did we looked at the Wi-Fi? No, we didn't look at it yet. How does it suddenly feel like we have? How many things we have? Wi-Fi and the fourth one. Oh, okay. Yeah. This is the if he would have asked for permission, would the owner have been able to have said no?
No, he had to say yes because he had no loss.
Okay, but good. What you're saying is an interesting point. And then let me understand. And if he doesn't ask for permission, then what are you saying?
Then he should be paying.
He should be paying? Why should he be paying?
Because he didn't ask for permission. So he's using something that's not his.
But that makes no sense. If he would have asked for permission, the owner has no choice but to say yes. If he
Right.
didn't ask for permission, so then he's going to have to pay because he didn't ask for permission. I don't understand that. To me, it's not adding up. But hold on a second. Let's look at the Talmud. You guys have picked up on something important here. Are we saying, when is this all happening here? Right now, the owner came and he found the squatter there, right? Can the squatter stay?
But the point is, Rabbi, it's all very simple. It's about chesed. If something happened, it's in the past, it's already done, and it didn't cause you any great grief or trouble, and you didn't really notice it, then of course under Torah values, you use kindness, chesed, and rachamim, etc. You're not there to be punitive. So the key point of it all is not to be punitive, right? Going forward, obviously then it's more of a negotiated thing. You can't then force the property owner that he has to let him squat. It then there's more of a give and take. So it's not rocket science. If something happened in the past, say the Wi-Fi sharing or the squatting, and the person didn't notice it and it didn't cause them any problem or inconvenience, then under Torah moral values, you don't be punitive about it. You let it go. Going forward, it's a slightly different matter that has to be negotiated because you have to consider the feelings of the property owner as well as the other person.
Okay, you said that nicely, Robert. I'll take issue though with the idea that it's just a question of being punitive or not. We see that it's a question of if someone else can benefit and I am losing nothing as a result, then I am obligated legally from the Torah law to allow that to go forward. So even to move forward, I'm obligated legally to allow that to happen. Now, therefore, in the case of the squatter, okay, so he doesn't have to pay because he didn't make me lose anything. But the question is now going forward, can he stay? Based on what we've laid out so far, he should be able to stay. He's not making me lose anything. And therefore, I should be allowing him to stay, even if he wants to stay after I notice that he's there, right? Based on that same principle. However, the Talmud is specific. The Talmud doesn't seem to give us that understanding that the squatter is allowed to stay, because otherwise it would talk about a much even greater case where you could say, not only doesn't he have to pay, he could stay for as long as he wants. But it deals with only the question of if he has to pay for the past, which seems to give us the impression he cannot stay. And the question is why? Why shouldn't he be able to stay? And this is the nuances are important here, because the Talmud, the commentaries explain what's happening here. As soon as you're dealing with property, it's different. If someone is this concept of he could just benefit from the fact that I have a property. You know, I'm going on I don't know, a camping trip, and I know my friend has a house in the mountains, and my hotel falls through, and can I just go and stay in his place without even asking him and just walk through the doors because he keeps his doors open? Can I go ahead and do that? And the answer is yes. So far, that's perfectly fine. But the moment my friend discovers that I'm there and says, "Hey, you're staying in my place," does he have to just let me continue staying there? And it seems to be no. Why the difference when it comes to property? So let's take a look at text 10, where we seem to get an understanding of a difference here. There's a legal difference when it comes to this case of property. Who would like to read for us? Luba, if you want to read for us, text 10, page 21.
We only compel the property owner not to conduct himself like the inhabitants of Sodom. Regarding the past, the squatter who resided on his property without paying rent is not compelled to pay him rent for the past. At the same time, it is clear that the property owner has the right to protest the squatter's presence and need not permit the squatter to remain on his property.
Why? Let's continue. Text 11, page 22. The explanation is?
In my opinion, the reason Tosafot rules that the property owner cannot be actively compelled to allow a squatter on his property is because compulsion is, in such an instance, would be forcible negotiation of the property owner's control over his own property. Most people would object to this. The failure of an individual to consent to something that most people would object to cannot be considered Sodom-like conduct. However, the squatter's presence on the property without the owner's knowledge doesn't negate the owner's control of the property because the owner retains the right to evict the squatters at any time.
Okay. In other words, thank you, Lubov. In other words, if the Torah would say you have to always allow any person to come into your property at any time and use it because it's not on the market and because you're not losing anything out, you're effectively losing ownership of your property. You are no longer, that's effectively negating. A property is something where a person goes and lives in. Now someone's living on your property, he's kind of negating your ownership. And therefore, the Torah is not going to mandate and say you have to allow that to take place. Therefore, you are not obligated to allow a squatter to come and stay there. However, when he stayed there without your knowledge, he wasn't negating because at any time you could have told him, get out of my property. When you discovered that he was there, so it turns out in retrospect, he benefited, you didn't lose anything out. You could tell him to leave now, it's within your rights to tell him to leave, but you can't request any payment because requesting payment would be behaving like storm-like. Is that clear? Yeah? So there we have a difference here, and this kind of takes us to the question of case studies C and D. When it came to the Wi-Fi connection, if I am using someone else's Wi-Fi, it's an open network. If I'm going to be slowing down that connection, then I'm damaging them. Okay, that's a different story. So I know this guy's out of town and I know he has unlimited Wi-Fi. So in no way am I damaging him. Am I allowed to use his open Wi-Fi network? It seems to be pretty clear cut. Is it negating his ownership of his Wi-Fi by me using his Wi-Fi network? Nonsense. It seems to be no problem whatsoever. When it comes to parking in the driveway of your neighbor, so they're out of town, can you go and park there and without his permission? And what do you think? It seems like you would be able to park it without his permission, because he's not losing anything out, and therefore it would be stom-like conduct for him to say, no, it's my parking lot, you don't park in my parking lot. He's not losing anything else. The Torah would mandate a person. The question is, what's interesting is, if what happens if the neighbor says, you're not, I don't want you to park it. I don't want you to park it. Does he have a right to object?
Why
Yes.
aren't we saying it's the same thing as using a property? It is a property.
Oh, okay, so that's interesting. So I would say it boils down to exactly the same thing. Does he have a right to object? Would be boiled down to, do you look at the driveway the same way as if you look at a property? Or you say the fact the guy parks his car in the driveway and it stays there for overnight, it's not negating my ownership of my driveway. It's still my driveway. He parks his car there. Okay, that's debatable. I hear that.
Clearly, you don't know what happens in Tel Aviv. People are renting out their parkway. Yeah.
It's a valuable asset, a parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. So that could be actually part of it. Maybe, depending where you live, depending on things, would you have the right to protest? Would be depending on how meaningful it is. The fact that the guy's parking, is that really negated? So if so, then that's something he's within his bounds to do it, and he absolutely can. If not, then he shouldn't even be protesting someone parking in his parking lot, because it doesn't affect him and it doesn't really take away from his ownership either. So that's debatable, like we said. Okay, what we aren't going to have time to get to, but is the last situation here, is something we mentioned in the beginning. I don't know if you paid attention to it, but in the Mishnah we saw, if one who says, mine is mine, if he loses out, right? If he's going to lose out of someone else partaking in his thing, so then he's entitled to not. Remember? Hold on 1 second. Buzzing here. If he's going to lose out from someone else partaking in this thing, so he's entitled to say, I don't want you to partake in it. If he's not going to lose out, so then he has to allow the person to partake. What that means is, so many cases, you have to accommodate someone else. If I'm driving somewhere, someone asks for a ride, he's going to the same place as me, I need to give him a ride, unless in some way that's going to affect me, but that's your requirement, responsibility. However, there is actually a concept of not just behaving average behavior, but going a step further, which the Torah discusses about. Yes, there is righteous behavior, recommended conduct. You'll see page 24, ways of the righteous, text 12, which talks about recommended conduct, is even if it means that you're going to suffer a loss, there's still, it's recommended conduct. And especially if you're someone who could demand a little bit more from, it's recommended, yes, take a loss, help someone else, even if it means you're taking a loss. And that's already going beyond it. That's the concept of tzedakah, that's the concept of chesed, and that's beyond it. You can't hold someone liable and responsible for it. It's definitely recommended. Certain people maybe are even held responsible because they're of that stature. They can be held responsible behaving beyond the letter of the law. Other people not. But where we leave off with tonight is we leave off with an understanding of a different foundation, which is what Torah is after in its civil laws. Torah is founded on the principle of doing right, and therefore its civil laws require us to actually do the right thing and not just be a stickler for your rights and say, I'm within my rights. You have to do the right thing. Therefore, you, in a court of law, or if you would ask your rabbi, say, what should I do in this situation? The rabbi said, you have to allow the person to, park in your driveway, or apply that to any situation. Start realizing how many times this actually comes up a lot more than we sometimes pay attention to. So here that gives us a basic understanding of some of the differences of how we would look at some of these in Jewish values through Jewish law, look at these classic civil cases where you could just be with which secular society is all about rights, and what's within my right is not within my right. Okay, and with that we'll conclude. Laila Tov, everyone. Next week we are looking at restitution. If a person messes up, what's within the legal requirements to fix up things that you messed up, and how Torah and Jewish values, Jewish civil law deals with that discussion in a fascinating, looking at things like that. There's a lot more in the student book to look through. So if you want to take a look at more, I encourage you to do some extra reading. There's a lot more fascinating stuff. Laila Tov.
Laila Tov, thank
Any
you.
questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Laila Tov.
Good seeing everyone. Laila
Thank
Tov,
you.
looking forward to seeing you next week, please God. All the best. Safe travels. להתראות.